Welcome back to Everyday Economics, the podcast that helps you learn about the economic world happening around you every day. I'm your host, Chris Krug, CEO of the 501c3 nonprofit, nonpartisan Franklin News Foundation. Everyday Economics is a production of America's Talking Network. You can subscribe to all of our podcasts at americastalking.com. To support Everyday Economics, please make your tax-deductible charitable contribution by clicking to the link in the show description. We are recording this episode on Friday, May 17th, and joining me as always, my friend and colleague, Dr. Orphe Divounguy, PhD economist. Dr. O, we've had a couple of weeks to take a look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics employment report for the month of April, and the number was noticeably small.
Chris, I hear this all the time. The number was small. The number was not small. 175,000 jobs added is a hot jobs report when you compare it to before the pandemic, right? It's like you have 175,000 jobs added.
Yeah.
You have a 3.9% unemployment rate.
Yeah. What's the definition of a job per the BLS?
Oh, come on, Chris. Listen, let's not.
I'm telling you. Hey, here's the word on the street.
Let's continue to use the same yardstick, right? Look, even if your scale is broken, if you go on the scale if you go on a broken scale every single day, you can just use that broken scale to see whether or not you're moving in the right direction, right?
I'm working with the tools that are provided to us. And my concern always with the jobs report, and I freely admit I'm somewhat jaded, 1 hour on a payroll in the previous month. I still think that the jobs report contains a lot of data that doesn't make sense to the average American.
Let me tell you something. I agree with you to some extent, but let me tell you something. If for some reason the labor market was much looser than this jobs report portrays, we would not have inflation where it's at today, right?
Fair enough.
Right? People would not listen during recessions when the unemployment rate is high, when people are not making ends meet, they don't go out and spend, and prices typically aren't rising.
Okay, but we're only starting to see kind of the end of spending.
Well, price growth easing from 0.4% last month to 0.3% this month. Look, yes, it's some easing that the market really wanted, but ultimately prices are still advancing because the consumer is still spending.
All right.
Right? So I understand. I understand the frustration with the numbers.
What are we going to? I'm just curious what what you're going to say next month. You and I think, are on opposite ends of that yardstick, and I'm not sure that you're using a yardstick. I think you're using perhaps a meter stick. I think you're giving yourself an extra 3 inches on this, my friend.
Look, I agree with you. The consumer is slowing down. Absolutely, the consumer has to slow down because debt, savings dwindling, and a labor market that is slowing down. But it's a slowing down from an overheated labor market.
All right. So I infused my skepticism and maybe a little bit of cynicism. So you tell me what you see in this employment report.
I see a beautiful labor market. I see a U.S. economy that is easing, not crashing. When you think about all the other economies, major economies in the world that saw the kind of tightening and you saw in Europe, you had some economies falling into a recession right? The U.S. economy has been stellar. Okay. In fact, maybe too hot at times. All of quarter one, we were hoping for more progress on the inflation front, and we didn't get that. Right? We didn't get that because the consumer was still so strong. And now, yes, we're starting to see weakness, but it's still pretty good. In fact, that jobs report is supporting consumers. When you have the unemployment rate at 3.9%, man. And then yesterday we had some news with unemployment claims. Unemployment claims dropped again. They were rising a little bit. All of a sudden, they dropped again. This is still a tight labor market. It's loosening somewhat, but it's still a tight labor market. And then a lot of people say, well, the unemployment rate is kind of a lag measure, and you shouldn't look at the unemployment rate.
Is that supposed to be? Is that your take on my voice? I like that.
No, that's not you.
That sounds like
that
sounds like what my kids think I sound like.
Oh, Listen, my kids probably think I sound like that too. Yeah, I thought my dad sounded like that too.
Everybody's dad sounds like that. All right. So one of the things that you and I were talking about pre-show was the market reaction. And of course, Jerome Powell, Fed chair, had some things to say earlier this week. And of course, like the old E.F. Hutton ads, when E.F. Hutton used to talk, everybody would stop what they were doing and listen. Jerome Powell has that same power and authority. The market was pretty much digging what he was putting down.
Yeah. I mean, Jay Powell comes out and says some crazy thing like, what did he say? I can't remember what he said. He said, I don't see the stag or the inflation is I think what he said. And that made the rounds. It was hilarious.
I like that. That could be a hip hop song.
It could. Yeah. I mean, look, the thing though, that Jerome Powell, I agree with him, but you cannot completely dismiss this notion. The market was like so antsy before the CPI report because look, when you have energy prices rising the way they are, and at the same time you have the economy slowing down, right? Essentially, you have hints that perhaps.
Yes. There are breadcrumbs. There are breadcrumbs on the ground here.
That perhaps stagflation is on the way, right? It's coming. What you don't want is a consumer that's slowed down, an economy that's basically contracting and prices remaining elevated, or at least price inflation remaining elevated. So there were some hints of that, which is probably why when we got that CPI report, we got this market rally, right? The market breathed a big sigh of relief. And I think maybe some people at the Federal did too. Even though, of course, Jay Powell at least came out and seemed to be confident that there was no stag or inflation on the horizon.
I took us off the path a little bit, so let me give you a shot. Final thought on the employment report. What do you make of it?
I think it's a good. I mean, it's as good as it gets, man. Like by the way, construction sector employment still rising. We got a housing starts report that was only slightly disappointing yesterday because basically what you're seeing is single family housing starts decreasing slightly. But ultimately, housing starts still up 18% when compared to a year ago. Is that
an access to capital issue, or an unwillingness to borrow at current rates? In your opinion?
No, I think it is a little bit of both, right? It is, yes, interest rates are too high, are squeezing builders, but at the same time, mortgage rates increase, squeezing consumers, reducing foot traffic, and so builders expecting demand to ease, right, will take a step back. Like the last thing they want is to have a ton of unsold homes sitting around. Builders want to be able to sell those homes, repay their debts, and move on, right? Move on to the next project.
Because lumber prices are down over the last 6 months. The last 1 month, they're up about 7.5%. Of course, that could be seasonal, right?
Yeah, totally. But yeah, I mean, I like that you pointed this out. Look, ultimately, builders are facing major. I mean, I don't know if I should call it major headwinds because it's just all going to depend on where demand ends up. Demand creates its own supply. If demand is robust, or at least if builders expect demand to be robust, they're going to continue building, right? Regardless of what the cost on the cost side,
because the consumer will pay it.
Exactly, because the consumer will pay, right? And so yeah. So, but the point is, look, going back to the employment report, you got strong construction employment. Fantastic news. We still have more homes being completed today than we've had in a long time. That's going to create some loosening of the housing market. It's good, right? It's good for the economy. We create 175,000 jobs, right? And whether or not we believe that number, we look at the unemployment claims. Clearly, not a lot of people are looking to claim unemployment benefits because they're working. Whether they're working 1 job, 2 jobs, 3 jobs, you know what? They're working, they're earning, and they're still spending. Yes, some easing, of course, but the easing is coming from a place where we had too much spending, right? And so now we went from unsustainable to maybe slightly more normal. The jobs report looked like a pre-pandemic strong jobs report.
All right. Well, I appreciate your thoughts as always. For Dr. Orphe Divounguy, this has been Chris Krug. Subscribe to Everyday Economics and dozens of other high-quality podcasts at americastalking.com.
Knowledge is power, and you deserve to know what happens in your state government. That's why the Center Square's reporting zeroes in on state authorities publishing stories that show where your money goes and who spends it. The Center Square gives power to the taxpayer by tracking politicians' use of the people's money and demanding transparency from state-run agencies. This is how the Center Square equips you, the American taxpayer, to hold your state government accountable. Sign up now for your state's Center Square newsletter at thecentersquare.com.